Ooh. Good morning. Hope you are doing well. I am quite well myself. Um, Today, oh God, today we're going to talk about how I used to be a millionaire and I'm not anymore. And I'm going to go over with you what I did right, what I did wrong, what I'm doing now to get it back, and what you can do to not make my same mistakes and do it yourself if you want to. So, let's chat about it. I feel like I should have put, like, I should have spiked my coffee for this particular conversation to make it easier on myself so I don't cry. Okay, first of all, let me just qualify what I mean by millionaire because there's going to be a lot of nitpicking about this in the comments. There are different ways, like, I think the most legitimate way to qualify yourself as a millionaire is to have multiple millions of dollars in the bank, cash. I didn't have that. So if you don't want that advice, then get the fuck off my page because that's not me. Let me tell you what I qualified as a millionaire. Multiple times in my life, my businesses made over $1 million. I personally controlled over seven figures within the period of a year. And my businesses were making enough money where on paper I was a millionaire. That's how I qualify it. If you don't like that, then this is not the video for you, and I guess you just don't want to hear what I have to say. Um, Also, just in terms of lifestyle, and this is probably the reason why I'm not a millionaire anymore, a millionaire, uh, I certainly lived like the millionaire lifestyle for a while, meaning like I had all of my dream cars. I lived in a huge house. I traveled first class. I rented out villas overseas. Um, I did whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. I was in the mall with stacks in my pocket. Um, I was living the true rich 20 something lifestyle. So that's my qualification for a millionaire. Again, if you don't agree with that, I understand. There are certainly people that are friends of mine who have been way richer than me, and whatever. Like that, this is just my story. So that's how I'll qualify it. Um, First of all, like let's just talk about what I did right. So I started my journey to building businesses and making money online it would have been as early as 2012. 2012 was the last time I had, or would it be? It would have been probably 2011 was the last time I had an actual W-2 job, and that was working at Longhorn Steakhouse in Atlanta, Georgia, um, right by the right by right in Cobb County. Um, and that was my last W-2 job. And from there, I just became obsessed with figuring out how to use the internet to leverage myself and my skills to support myself. The great thing about this period of time was that being that I would have been 21, 22, I was completely delusional. It was a completely delusional age, and that is really helpful when starting off in your building wealth and riches journey because you have to believe that it's going to go differently for you than it's gone for everyone else because statistically you are going to have to be an anomaly to accomplish those goals. So it helps to have that self-belief. In fact, I think it's imperative that you have that self-belief. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get over you're not going to be able to climb the mental mountain. So you have to believe that something different is possible for you. And I do think that that's a benefit of starting young. Now, there are also benefits to starting later because then you have more wisdom. But I think starting young, the ignorance is bliss thing, maybe not even bliss, but like the ignorance creates some sort of capability because you don't know what you can't do. And when you are young and ignorant, you also have a certain amount of um, you'll get beginner's luck sometimes, and you'll attribute that to skill or to some innate talent of yours, and that's actually helpful because it just keeps you going. So I would say that the first thing I got right was just the delusion of young age. And I think that so for me, uh, if you know my story and if you've read my book, I started off freelancing online, and freelancing essentially just allowed me to cut my teeth on transacting business online. And what I eventually turned that into was then consulting and then using the skills that I learned from freelancing and consulting to then build courses and information products um, that allowed me to scale that knowledge. And so that's what allowed me to bring in the money. So let me see. I think at that age, because I was super young and I was really devoted to this path, I created no options for myself, and I think that was something that I did right. The last job, like I said, the last job I had was working at a restaurant. So I'm basically, well, I wouldn't say I'm unemployable. I'm very employable in terms of I have so many skills now. But if I were to look at my resume, I mean, I don't have a corporate resume. So I cut off my corporate path right after college, and I've never revisited it. And so in that way, I shut down a lot of the optionality that my friends now enjoy. And by the way, like I'm saying, my friends who took the corporate path, and they would perhaps disagree with me because there's another side to corporate, which although there is maybe more security, I mean, I argue about this in my book, but like, yes, there's some security in working for someone else. However, and really what it is it's not even security, it's consistency. While you have a job, if you're working corporate, while you do have that job, you're getting a consistent paycheck, and that's very, very nice. It's something that entrepreneurs crave, and eventually you hope to get to that point. But I would say that just remember, when you're working corporate, or you're working for a bigger company, at the end of the day, you're working for an entrepreneur. You're working for someone who decided that they're going to go out there, they're going to be a little bit delusional, they're going to make no options for themselves, and they're going to get after it. And most businesses, I mean, unless you are like one of the top businesses in the market, on the stock market, most businesses are small businesses. Even if you're making a few $100 million, I believe those are still considered small businesses, or $50 million or whatever, which is a huge business. It's a big business for any actual like everyday person. It's a huge business, but the government would still qualify that as a small business. So most people watching this are probably working for a small business, and that small business has a founder or a number of founders, a few founders who decide to risk it all and go for it. And you have to have that mentality. And I did have that mentality. I still do. And I believe that that's to my benefit. I created no options for myself. Even now, like as I'm rebuilding, which I'll talk about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, I still have created no options for myself in terms of like, I'm not gonna, you think I'm gonna go out there and get a job? Like, no, 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 no. I will go live with my mom before I go get a job, which might sound uh, self-defeatist, but it's just the way that it is. I've programmed myself at this point to only be willing to work for myself. And I blame slash credit my grandmother with this, because she was an attorney who always had her own practice. And even when she didn't have her own practice, she opened up her own store. And she just never, and then even, she had a store. And then she also was one of the first people I ever saw work online in terms of like e-commerce. She had an eBay store, and she sold on eBay and Amazon. And now that I think, yeah, she was the first person I ever saw do e-commerce, and I actually made her first e-commerce website. She made these really like beautiful handcrafted candles, and it was called Kitchen Whimsy. And I remember I was in high school and I just learned HTML, and I coded her website for her, and she was amazed that I could code a website. And this is before WordPress was readily available, and templated sites were readily available. Her mind was blown because this would have been like super early 2000s. So anyway, I've been hard coded from the very beginning to only work for myself, to only be independent. You know, in my childhood growing up, when she had her store, we used to go and we used to like buy the inventory, and then we would mark it up and resell it. And I remember going, and then after the weekend rush, because she sold like collectibles, and she was at a time when Beanie Babies were really hot. I don't know if you remember those. They were a huge craze. And man, we used to have weekends where we'd be making thousands and thousands of dollars, and she would break me off a certain percentage. And I remember in the car after after our weekends working together, she'd peel me off a few $100s, and that was like gold to me. I was like, I can't believe that I helped create this business and I'm getting paid from this. So I think that programmed me very early, and I couldn't go back. So that's in my advantage category. You have to have a certain mindset, certain mentality, and you know, I think you can develop the mentality and the strength mentally, but you have to have a certain psychological makeup to want to even do this. I used to think that I used to think that, and I never really said this out loud, but I used to think that being an entrepreneur was there was like a moral or ethical component to it. It sounds bad to say, but I used to think that, yeah, you're better if you're an entrepreneur. Now I definitely don't think that. I think there's no moral or ethical stance around entrepreneurship besides you just want to do that. Having a 9 to 5 career is great if you want to do that. It's Being a business owner is so freaking hard. I wouldn't encourage anybody to do it unless that's the only thing they could do. It reminds me of my acting coach back in Tampa. Her name was Kathy, and she's like, guys, if there's anything else you can do besides acting, you should do that because this is such a hard path that you have to have no other option mentally to make it. Otherwise, you're not going to make it by accident usually. You know, that people don't luck into this type of stuff. Sometimes yes, but usually no. I think it's the same thing with business. Yes, you can start something and it will go gangbusters and maybe you're surprised, but generally speaking, you have to have the psychological makeup to be able to withstand the many, many, many barriers you're going to encounter. And so those were to my advantage. So I left no options for myself. I have to also be honest that one of the advantages in my corner was timing. So when it comes to making money in my space where I've primarily made money, which is the transfer of information, timing was a big factor. So when I was studying this stuff, I can remember my first exposure, well, really my first exposure to info products, if I really think about it, I mean, books are info products, right? But my first exposure to info products was probably Tony Robbins back in the 90s, but I didn't really think about it as info products, and I didn't pay for any of that stuff. My first exposure to paying for a piece of information was Eben Pagan or David D'Angelo's Double Your Dating System. So this is like pickup art back in the day, which is just how to get women. Although I will say, not to go off on a tangent about this, the pickup artist community eventually became red pill, and that shit got nasty and weird. I would say that David D'Angelo, his real name is Eben Pagan, created some timeless stuff where it wasn't about manipulation. It was more about just becoming a better person, becoming a better man. And I actually really appreciate his work. But what I found really interesting was David D'Angelo was like his pseudonym, his pen name. And I found out years later that his real name was Eben Pagan. And what was more fascinating to me about Eben Pagan than David D'Angelo was David D'Angelo was the character he created as someone who was giving out dating advice. Eben Pagan was the mastermind behind all of the systems and all of the marketing that became this double your dating universe, this double your dating system. And I was more fascinated with Eben because Eben, we're talking early 2000s, we're talking like 2003, 4, 5 maybe, more than 20 years ago, was selling ebooks and then physical CDs and DVDs via mail and eventually online stuff. And I just thought it was amazing that he was able to make so much money off of just putting information on a CD and selling it, or putting so much information in an ebook and selling it because of the scale of that. And I remember being in college, so this would have been, even at that point in college, it was still a few years late because I remember getting into it in high school. But like I just remember in college sitting down and studying all this stuff and thinking, so he put information that's completely scalable and doesn't cost any money to reproduce into a format that everyone can access, and then he just gets traffic to that. He just gets eyeballs to that, and that's what makes him money. Like that kind of blew my mind, and also it made me shy away from wanting to work a traditional career. I'm like, why would I just do something like this with my own information? That was very attractive to me, and I have to say that like timing was a factor. we are still in an information age, but now information is abundant. I mean, the fact that AI exists hasn't killed the information industry. And I talked about this, in recent videos. I'll link to this video at the end if I can remember. I talked about how AI has destroyed my old business model. I wouldn't say that AI has completely killed the information industry, but it has to be less about the information and more about the transformation. And maybe it was always like that, but certainly for about a decade, there was a time when you could just sell the information because there was Google, but Google could only curate so much information in a personalized way. If you wanted to have something that really captured a specific avatar's viewpoint and solved a specific set of problems, Google was just the start. You needed someone to take that information and curate this. So timing of the internet industry between, let's call it 2005, and I'll even say, I'll be generous. I'll say the year 2000 to the year 2020. That's a generous time period. Within that time period, if you could curate information, even if the information was already out there, if you could be the one to curate it and package it, then you could reap the rewards of just having organized it in that way. Now, just organizing the information really isn't enough because there's so much of it. It's pretty well organized, and you can make custom organized information just with GPT to such a, well, I wouldn't use GPT. I'm using GPT as like a generic term, but Claude or Gemini or whatever. Now that information is so well packaged and it's all personalized that just me doing it for you, putting it in a course, giving you an ebook, making you an audio series, not as attractive. There will always be the traditional forms of packaged information. I mean, this is why, my company makes books, and books still sell really well. Even paperback and hardcover books still sell really well. But books are, relatively cheap forms of information transfer that people will still want to use and utilize. And they also, there's like the physical component of it too. There's like a totem element to it that people like having a book. But I would say in terms of information products, we've definitely passed the golden age, is what I'm saying. And I remember for a while I worked with Ramit at I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and I was doing copywriting for him. And this was like in 2014. And I mean, that was just the heyday of the internet era, of the internet marketing era. And we would do webinars that would do, I don't know if we would do $1 million on the webinar, but we would do webinars that would do hundreds of thousands of dollars. He would do millions of dollars a year. And I'm sure he still does, but he's OG'd. He's kind of grandfathered in. If you were to just do whatever he's doing now, you're not going to get the same results because the environment and the timing is different. A lot of people who make money, especially online because of specific cultural trends, don't like to admit that the timing that they got in is highly relevant. So for me, it was highly relevant. When I started writing online, Rich 20-something, the blog, opened up in 2012, and really I started to get hot around 2014, 15, 16, and this was when we were peaking in terms of internet information transfer, in terms of that business. And so my exposure to that at a young age, and then working my way into it over a period of 6 or 7 years, positioned me at the right time to take advantage of that. And so that was to my advantage. I do have talent on here. Talent is a part of it. Talent definitely is a part of it. My talent has always been writing, or I would say one of my main talents has always been writing. It's been writing and speaking. From a young age, I think you have some natural abilities, and then certain things get reinforced in your life, and those things you put more energy into because you're being reinforced and you like to be praised. So from a young age, I've always enjoyed writing. I got praised for it, so I put more work into it. Same thing with public speaking. I've as a kid won writing contests and awards and speaking contests and awards, and those things I poured into. And I actually for a while thought that maybe I would become like a motivational speaker, like a Les Brown type thing, but that was really before, like I was thinking about that before YouTube was really an avenue, and I thought I'd have to go on the road, and I just didn't really understand how to do it. And And those particular talents lend themselves very well to internet and internet marketing. It's writing and speaking, especially writing because I learned early on how to do copywriting. And that was really something that I learned when working with Ramit. Working in his company taught me how to copyright, which is basically just writing to persuade, writing to get people to buy things and take an action. Now, what I come to learn later down the road is that just because you can write words that make people buy things doesn't mean that you're a good entrepreneur, which that's very obvious to say out loud, but that skill is so powerful that you can get drunk off of it. And I'm sure that you have a skill maybe that you're so good at that sometimes it clouds your vision on your areas of weakness or your areas that need improvement. That for me was writing. I got so good at writing to convert people to do things that I neglected building the other skills of business that would have served me well in that time. And of course, I've learned those skills since. I continue to learn them, but that was just something that I observed looking back. Same thing with speaking to a certain degree. So my own unique talents were definitely a factor in making millions of dollars over the years. Yeah, let's see. And you have talents too. I would also say, yeah, environment and network were a factor in me making millions. So a couple things. One, environment in terms of, like we talked about, the cultural environment and the timing, that's part of it. And then also just literally the people that I was around. Fairly early within this journey, let's see, it would have been end of 2013. My girlfriend and I moved, who became my wife eventually, moved to Los Angeles. We started off in Redondo Beach, and then we went to Venice. And that was a huge unlock for me because we moved. So we moved from Atlanta to Redondo, and Atlanta is pretty. I mean, Atlanta is a good place to be. In fact, when I was in Atlanta, I was writing and producing films, and that's maybe a different conversation for another day. But which also helped hone my skills online, honestly. Um, but Atlanta wouldn't have been the place where I was going to pop off in my internet marketing career, essentially. It just doesn't have the right mix of people, in my opinion. Now there's a different group of people there, and maybe that is not the case. But at that time, it wasn't the place to be for that. LA, though, was, for me at least. And because as soon as I got to LA, I started to meet people and connect with people who were also on a similar path. And I think that the energy of LA is, what can I say about the energy of LA? The energy of LA is it's a striving energy. And there is a certain amount of fakeness to LA. I won't deny it. I won't discount it. Um, but everyone has the desire to be rich in LA, and they have the desire to be rich without working that much. And because of that, people are going to find unique ways to make money. So internet marketing and making courses was a perfect fit for LA. And all of the friends and connections I made, I could have only made in LA because it's just like look, if you want to be an actor, I mean, maybe this is an outdated opinion now because the industry is it's being totally turned on its head. But there was a period in time where if you wanted to be, a big Hollywood star, well, you'd have to move to Hollywood. Obviously, like that's where the agents are, that's where the casting directors are, that's where the auditions are. You'd have to be in the action. If you want to meet a Dominican wife, you should go to the Bronx. That's where they're at, or the Dominican Republic. There's only in two places, so you have to go where the talent pool is. And so LA at that time was definitely stacked with talent in terms of people who I ended up working with on my team and with relationships that I still have. 95% of maybe 98% of my relationships that I met because of the 5-year period. Well, I lived in LA for almost 10 years, but like 95% of the relationships I have now were because of that short period of time that I was in LA making content, which it looks beautiful in LA, building Rich 20 something, writing, networking, and doing all that stuff. Like most of my relationships now, and even what I'm building now, is due to a lot of the relationships I made in LA. So, you know, there's something to be said about time, place, and network. And yes, we have video conferences now and all this stuff, but it's just not possible anywhere else. I mean, even if you look at like what I'm doing now, living in New York, and recently I've connected with Ryan Leslie, who's doing a book with New Wave Press, and he's taken me on as someone that he's mentoring, and it's like changing my life and all this stuff. And that's another video too. But he's in New York. Well, yes, I could meet him somewhere else. We did actually meet up in Atlanta at one point, but I haven't seen him in LA in a while. He's either in New York or he's in Europe. And it doesn't mean that we would never connect, but proximity is power, as they say. So I think that the environment and the location and the network had a huge impact on my ability to grow my businesses and make money, for sure. Those were to my advantage. I'm not going to hone too much in on this, but luck certainly played a part in me making millions. There are just certain elements that you can't replicate. I'll give you a good example. I was doing a podcast out of a studio that I had in LA, and I mean, I can even just talk through this. I was living in Venice, within walking distance of my apartment in Venice, which was like a nice loft right by the beach. Amazing lifestyle. There was a jiu-jitsu studio. It was a jiu-jitsu gym. It was Verdum, which is, Fabricio Verdum's old gym, UFC champion. And I started training there. One of my training partners at that gym worked in a recording studio. We got to becoming friends. And then eventually he just started letting me use the studio for free to produce my podcast, which was amazing because I had that great studio in Santa Monica in a nice building. I mean, it was like pretty amazing. This is like a great time period. Because I had access to the studio, I got to have some incredible guests in, and I'll have a cry session later about how I was one of the first ones to have long form podcasts. I mean, certainly wasn't anywhere near the first, but like I started my long form podcast in 2015. The level of content that I was putting out at that time and how much volume of other content other people had in terms of like the industry, I was still very, very early days. Now everyone has a podcast and it's fine, but I would have had so much more traction if I would have kept going. Anyway, it's not the point. Because of that studio, I got a lot of great guests, and one of my guests, for a session that I had scheduled for him, brought up Tom Bilyeu to sit in on our interview. Tom Bilyeu is the founder of Quest Nutrition, which he sold for $1 billion. Then he went on to start Impact Theory, and he's had his whole rise. And from that relationship with Tom, so much good has come in terms of like helping me to promote my stuff and relationships that have spawned from Tom. And it's like Venice Beach apartment, jiu-jitsu, audio recording studio, podcast, guest brings friend opens up whole world. So you can't write that stuff. It's planned. It's luck. It's not planned. Yes, I have to still be a good person coming to the interactions to make people want to work with me, but ultimately, a lot of these things are serendipitous. And again, it wouldn't have happened if I was in Idaho, and there's a certain element of luck that you have to give credit to. And that's just one example. There's like a million examples I could come up with, as many examples as I've had dollars. So luck is part of it. And then the last thing I'll say in terms of like in my advantage column before I get to what I did wrong is just relentlessness, from, I would say 2013 to, I mean, the whole time, I've been relentless the whole time, but there's a certain energy that I was bringing very early on where I was just going so fucking hard. And when you're in your early and mid 20s, you really have no rules in terms of how much energy. There's no cap to the energy output, because it was like full energy with building the business, which really was just like creating tons of content and writing and just going, no sleep. And then going full energy in the gym, going. Now, what I will tell you is my relationship suffered from that time period. It was not that it wasn't balanced and it wasn't healthy. But then it's like, well, when balance is healthy, but imbalance usually is what creates imbalanced results. Like if you want outsized results, you have to put in outsized energy, and you can't do it all at once. So I don't regret that time period, but I do regret. Well, I don't regret that time because I had to learn. I eventually came back into balance. But all I will say is like the relentless drive is what got the results at the end of the day, because it wasn't just one or two things I did that broke me open in terms of becoming popular online. It was like over and over and over and over. Even if you just look at the rise of my Instagram, which like now Instagram is stupid and it doesn't really seem relevant as much anymore. It's just part of our ecosystem. But at the time when I was growing my IG, which started in March of 2014, content was totally different. It was way less saturated, and I was just putting out content after content after content. I was just putting out post after post after post after post. And I give Nathan Chan, my friend, who is the CEO at Founder Magazine, a lot of credit because he's like, dude, you have to get on Instagram. Instagram is the wave. And I'm like, really? Okay. Because I was just blogging. And I got on Instagram and it blew my shit up. So 100% correct. He was 100% right about that. And it really, I mean, Instagram alone has made me millions. So thank you to Nathan Chan. I mean, there were times where it was the golden era of Instagram for me was being able to put up a post and then being able to say link in bio for whatever I wanted to promote, and thousands of people would flood that bio and start buying whatever I had on there. It was crazy, dude. Like there's nothing better than looking down at your phone and seeing sale, 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 over and over and over and over again. You know, whether it's for a couple dollars or a couple hundred or a couple $1,000s. You put up an offer and people just go, 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 go. It was amazing. And of course, because it was the first time I'd experienced that, I thought that it was gonna last like that forever, because I hadn't seen any type of cycle yet. I was still in the early phase. So that we talked about what I did right. What I did right accounts for, I don't know, about $7 million. I'd have to look and see exactly what my numbers were. It's about 7 million over a period of about 10 to 12 years. Or yeah, it would be about 7 million over the course of 10 to 12 years. Some years I made over 1 million. Some days I didn't make as much, but then combined it's like multiple millions. And like I said, some people will think, oh, 7 million ain't shit. I make that in a year. I eat that for breakfast. Well, good for you, buddy. Good for you. This is just me. Bitch, my family's from Detroit, okay? For me, that's ballin', you know? So that all I can tell you is my personal story. I can't pretend to be anyone that I'm not. So whatever, bro. Okay, let's talk about what I did wrong. And really, when I was making my coffee this morning, thinking about what did I do wrong, really, it's just the inverse of everything I did right. Every positive element has its own negative side to it. So when we talked about my delusional youth being a benefit, it's also a drawback because, again, I hadn't seen a full cycle of events. I hadn't seen a full cycle of an industry turn. I was in the middle of a bubble and I didn't know I was in a bubble. And when that's the case, you're likely to think that the results that you're getting are because you're special, you're good, you're unique. And yes, there are elements of that are true. Not everyone can do what I did, but it ain't just about me. I mean, so even like I will at some point, probably next year, relaunch this book, but I need to redo it heavily. And for a few reasons, because ultimately this book, there's a lot of really good mental stuff in this book, and there's a lot of really good, like just core principles in this book. But one, it needs to be redone for the age of AI. This book came out when I was 29, and I started writing it when I was like 24. So this really catalogs my thought process at this time. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be redone because of AI, but also I look at this book now and I think the person writing this, Daniel at that time, was attributing so much of the success that I was having to like the hustle. Like even if I'm like, the headline on the back of this book is Stop Procrastinating and Start Blazing Your Own Path to the Career and Life You Want Now. that's relevant. Um, I do think you have to get after it, and it it's not just about hard work. I mean, even I don't think do I have hustle on here? Hopefully I don't have hustle. But like this is a product of hustle culture. It's a product of hustle culture, and hustle culture has or had a lifespan, which I think is over now, and part of that is fueled by just the economy of where it is now, the culture of where it is now, people's tastes for what it is now. And so all of that I hadn't experienced for more than a few years. And so I attributed my success to my personal attributes when really, it had a lot to do with that time period and my specific industry. So there's a delusion um, of like just get after it at that age that is true but lacks context. Because you can just get after it and get after the wrong thing, or just get after it and it still doesn't work. And it's that's always been the case. But from my perspective at that age, I would have told you the only difference between me and someone else who wasn't successful was that they didn't get after it. But like that's just not the case. There's lots of people getting after it who are not getting it, and that's just the way it is. Okay, so yeah, I mean like the inverse of that is part. So okay, so I guess what I would say is part of the reason why that lack of information led to my losing millions is just because I felt like the only thing I would need would be the delusional self-belief. And you can have a delusional self-belief all day, and it's not going to unlock or help you to maintain your riches and your wealth if you don't have a lot of other factors. So that is, I guess, that's why the delusion um, was to my detriment. A couple other things. So when it comes to um, options, and so not leaving options and having great timing, those were to my advantage at one point, and then they became to my disadvantage because there was a period in time where, so there were two periods that I feel like I kind of messed up. The first is after Rich 20 came out. I'm being honest. Like Rich 20 came out when I was 29. It came out in 2017 in May. It came out May 2nd, 2017, which was 2 days before my 29th birthday. Um, and so I have to be honest. Like at that time, I was already exhausted with that whole shtick. Part of it was because I never I was just blogging. I never really had a clear vision for what I wanted that brand to be. I never even really thought about it as a brand. It clearly is and was a brand, but I never thought about it like that. And I guess one thing I never considered is that the mark that you make on people with a brand sticks in their head for a long time. And the amount of energy that went into building Rich 20 something is something that people still remember to this day. People still know me for that book and that blog, and I'm totally okay with that. But I didn't realize it was going to make such a mark. And because I didn't realize that, I didn't value it. So the fact that I was able to get 1 million readers to my blog, um, you know, every month for a while, the fact that I was able to even get a traditional book deal with a major publisher for 6 figures, uh, was a big deal I kind of took for granted. The fact that I was able to grow, hundreds of thousands of followers and get tens of millions of views on my content in a relatively short period of time, I'm like, oh, this is just normal for me. And so if I want to do it again, I can do it again. Yes, I can do it again, but I took for granted the fact that uh, how big timing was a piece of that. And so right after Rich 20 came out, I was already exhausted with the brand, and I made an immediate transition. So like the book came out in 2017. By 2018, I was basically done talking about it. Really honestly, the book came out in 2017, And by summer of 2017, so like May 2017, it came out. And by June, July, August of 2017, I was like, all right, that's over. Time to the next, let's go to the next thing. And that's just the wrong approach. That's the wrong approach. The right approach is you've just created this big movement, double down, double down. And of course, I'm the number one person responsible for that decision. But ultimately, what I would have liked is I would have loved to have some great mentors to sit me down and say, hey, you've just created something really special here. You need to keep going. And I didn't have anybody like that. And again, I have to be responsible for my own career. But at the same time, I'm just going to close this door over here. At the same time, I have to say, like, I wish my agent or my publisher would have said something to me. I mean, it's not their responsibility. It's not their responsibility. But I wish my agent or my publisher would have said something. I wish I would have had someone speak some wisdom into me about it, because I was mostly running with other people my age who were also experiencing some things and some larger levels of success for the first time. And I didn't really have anybody who was further out than me. Like I had some connections who were older than me, but I didn't have anybody who was in my industry who could sit me down and say, now that you've done this, it's time to double down. And so I kind of just flippantly let it go. Lots of simple things, like just like letting the blog kind of go into decay, letting the email list kind of go into decay, not systematizing my products in a way that was sustainable and that they were updated. And again, I have to give put most of the blame on myself, because I kind of wasn't interested in doing that in a lot of ways. But I also was missing the bigger picture of, it's not about you. It's about, you've created a brand now. And even if you don't want to run the brand yourself, you can sell this thing later. Like I wasn't thinking properly as a founder. I wasn't thinking any more than a few months in front of my face. And because money had come so easily to me, I didn't appreciate what I'd created. Even with, at one point I owned Under 30 CEO and Rich 20 something. Though that could have been, I could have built a conglomerate from that conglomerate. Like I could have built a nice little network up from that. I had a big email list. At one point it was like almost 200,000 people. I had multiple social channels running. I definitely could have created something that had staying power, and that I could have exited for a nice sum. And I just didn't put the pieces together in a way that really made sense, and it kind of all fell into decay. And I was kind of just like living this fast life where whenever I pushed the button, money was coming out. So I didn't feel a lot of reason to plan, because I'd had this, looking back, this track record of everything I'm doing is working. So I don't really need to have a crazy 5-year plan, because I'm good at this game. I can just do whatever I want. And that's just not the case. So I think right after Rich 20 came out was like just a facepalm moment for me, but I didn't realize that was happening. And so that happened. And then I think at a certain point, I started to realize that what I had built was worth something. But then the industry had already kind of started to move on, and my systems had started to decay. So then once I realized that was happening, I kind of tried to go back and cling to what I'd built, but the industry was kind of already moving on without me. And so it's like I didn't give up, but I moved on too early to try to do something else, to try to like expand the brand. I renamed it, and I renamed it Alpha Mentorship. And I tried to, the brand became confusing. So I confused the brand. I didn't double down. And then once I realized I had messed up, I kind of tried to go back and revive what I had by like reviving the courses and, like just going back. And then I was trying to cling to something that already left the station. So it was kind of like this double face palm. And so all that to say, what was the word that I used here was optionality and timing. So like on the one hand, it was to my benefit that I created no options for myself on the way up, and that I had great timing in terms of the industry. On the other hand, it was to my detriment when I created no options for myself in terms of like, well, one, trying to stick to something that was no longer working for me, and then also not understanding the timing of things, that the industry was here, now it's here, and you haven't moved on. And so what got me there wasn't going to get me here. This is a great book by Marshall Goldsmith. What got you here won't get you there. Same thing. Um, and there was a lack of respect for what I'd built because it came too easy. And when something comes too easy, you just don't respect it. And I've seen this with clients and friends too. If I've had friends who have started online businesses and within a couple months have been making $1 million a month from just putting out information. And this was like back in 2017, 18. And it was amazing to watch these people. But you can't, I mean, very, very few people would get that type of result, understand the fortune that's being rained on them, and double down correctly. It's just, you just can't do it. Like, and this person was younger than me. This person would have been like 23, 24. Like, you just, because you attribute too much of the success to your personal value. And it's just, if you start up a business and it's making $1 million a month within the first few months, trust me, it ain't about you. Because the market doesn't know you well enough. I mean, very rarely is going to be about how good you are. And so I think if you get something too early, you don't appreciate it. I mean, I assume it's the same with people who inherit money to a certain extent. Like, if you're just given, if you just wake up and you have $10 million in your account just for being born, how can you appreciate it? You don't know any of the struggle that it's taken to accumulate that wealth. And this is why second and third generation wealth usually squanders it. Or second generation will maintain it, sometimes grow it, but third and fourth generation will usually always squander it and lose it. Because the connection with the value and the time, and the effort and the sacrifice, and this blood and the pain, the sweat and the tears and the agony and the staying up at night and all that stuff that's taken to accomplish it, there's no connection to that several generations on. And so for me, because I didn't have to really suffer that much to succeed in the beginning stages of my career, I didn't value that success as much. I didn't value, I mean, like, now I don't have money pouring in all the time. When I do again, I'm going to be much more appreciative because I understand that money can also not pour in. If it can do this, it can also do the opposite. And when it starts raining again, thank God, and thank yourself, and keep doing what you're doing. So, yeah, there was a time where I was like super bitter at myself for allowing it to get to the point where I had let my brand equity corrode and I didn't have the same access to the resources I had anymore. But now I look at it as, well, I actually had to experience that to fully appreciate the value that I'd created and to fully appreciate the impact that a brand had made, so that next time I do that, I can recognize the signs of success. And next time I do that, I don't attribute the success to anything else but like a combination of factors, and I take advantage of it and I make hay while the sun is shining. So, full stop there. And then, yeah, like, I'll just kind of quickly breeze through the rest of these. I think something important to note here is that talent was to my advantage in the beginning and it became to my detriment at the end, because there was a certain period of time where I wasn't growing. And I guess we're always growing, right? But like, as a writer and as a content creator and as a marketer, that's a skill set that's very, very useful. And marketers are great at getting things off the ground. What we're not great at is building a sustainable business. Tai Lopez is a great example. Now, Tai Lopez is in a lot of trouble right now with the SEC, right? Either the SEC or the FTC, probably the SEC, because he is a fantastic marketer who cannot deliver a product to save his life. He made the famous Here in My Garage videos, and 67 Steps was one of his programs. He's made a bunch of different programs. And I'll preface it by saying this. Tai has always been nice to me. He's friends with some of my friends. I don't think he's an evil person. I think he's a genius marketer. He was first to market on a lot of these different areas. He really coined lifestyle entrepreneurship to a certain extent in his era and his little niche of the internet. And he knows social. He was killing it on social media, but he's never had a good product. His products have always been surface level, kind of scammy, um, not really well done, not well maintained, and not really deliver a lot of value. And I say this as someone who I've been in some of Ty's products. I've taught some of his programs. Um, I don't consider him a friend, but he's a friend adjacent, and I don't have any personal problems with him. But game recognized game, and lack of game recognized lack of game. So I've never scammed anybody, um, but Ty and I have played the same game in terms of like build up the hype, create a product that could be better, but it's just serviceable, sell it as much as possible. It's not really the move. And the more you do that, the more people will get burned and don't want to work with you anymore. Um, Even like my first product, Freelance Domination, was actually a great product for its era. And I mean, I still have people to this day, 10 plus years later, who are like, yeah, that product actually kicked off my journey into self-employment, into owning a business. And so I know that it was appreciated. Where I messed up was I never updated it. I just tried to continue forcing the same product down people's throats without really taking into account the fact that the industry was changing, that there are things that need to be updated, that things need to be really maintained in a professional way. And so obviously sales are not going to do well if you don't maintain and improve and develop products. Like that's the core of business. And that's really a skill that I lacked. And of course, you say, well, hire people for that. Of course, yes, duh. But like, I'm just telling you, I didn't have the vision for that. I was able to create an initial product that was pretty good. I was able to sell the crap out of it, make a few million, and then I didn't do any further iteration on it. And that's just not the way that you're going to be successful in business. It's not about the marketing, it's about the product. At the end of the day, it's about the product. Um, I know that people will say like it's not about how good the product is, it's about how many people know about it, and marketing is really important. It is important. Marketing and sales, totally important. But a great product will create great customer relationships over time, and those customer relationships will be the most valuable thing to you. I always say this, and I feel like I've been saying this in every video now. It goes back to Dan Kennedy again. We don't get customers to make sales. We make sales to get customers. I was so focused on getting customers to make sales, which is that immediate cash. I wasn't thinking about, oh, how do I increase the customer lifetime value here? How do I deliver so much value that people want to buy everything I put out? That is the real key, my friends. This is something that Ramit has always done well. This is something that my friends at Founder have always done well. Creating great products is the long-term lifeblood of a business. It's not about how well can you market something. So this is something that Ty, is learning because none of his shit's selling anymore. In fact, one of his businesses a couple of years ago asked me to come in and be CEO, and I'm glad I stayed away from that because now if you look at why he's in trouble, it's because he purchased all of these different legacy businesses like Radio Shack and Pier 1 and Dress Barn that are like well-known American business names. And he's like, oh, what we're going to do is we're going to turn them into modern e-commerce brands. And we're going to use the power of their brand name for online marketing, which is a great position, a great pitch. And he got people to invest tens of millions of dollars. I think like maybe $100 million in investment he collected for this. But then he completely fumbled the products, which is the actual brand rollout. Like the companies were not well maintained. The books were not well maintained. So he was crossing money between all the different brands. He was taking money out of it for his own personal enjoyment. Now that's where you start to get into like criminal territory. He didn't return investors' money, so like that's criminal territory. That thankfully I've never dipped my foot into that edge of the pool. But like his marketing brain is solid. I think the actual idea is pretty genius. The execution is where it fell off, and I've also experienced that. It's about the execution of it. So I didn't realize this until later, and it took me a few iterations of this. So now it's like I did all the internet marketing stuff, and then I made another brand called Strength of Seduction, which actually I'm very, very proud of the product. And we had about 20,000 customers for that brand, and that was just a situation where the offer and the timing, and I made a whole video on this. I probably will put this in the chat not in the chat, in the description as well. You can just search my channel. It's like I spent $1 million acquiring customers and the business still failed. That wasn't about the product. The product itself was actually very good, but there were a lot of other factors that just led to that not being successful. So it's not only about the product, but the product is so important. Now, as we're building New Wave Press, which is my new company, now it's like, okay, even like the conversations I've had with my co-founder now, it's like we put out one book in 2025. We have three more we're going to put out in this year, 2026. Maybe we'll put out four, at least three. And I don't want to take on, I mean, yes, we would like to make money and bring on more clients. Yes, we want more authors, but I am not concerned with getting a bunch of clients in and just putting out books that are okay. Every book we put out needs to be the absolute best quality we can make it and allow that product to be the signal to bring in more customers. Rather than think about like what are the creative ways we can market to get more customers in, yes, that's important as a skill to have, but really the marketing should be the product. We want to put out great products, and then once we have great products, then we can build on top of it strategic marketing things, to tactical marketing things. But if the product isn't as great as we can make it, it doesn't matter. So now we're taking our time with these things, and that's going to be a better effect. But it's taken me a few iterations of different business models to understand that skill set is just as important as the marketing and sales skill set, and long term, it's more important. So yeah, it's just, mistakes that I made, and I couldn't have learned them unless I made those mistakes. Let's see. And then the last thing I'll say, what I did wrong, I would just say the relentlessness is good. The relentless focus on success is good. But sometimes if you're so relentless that you're not looking at the wider picture and your viewpoint is very narrow, you miss the forest for the trees, as they say. And now I'm trying to take a wider approach to things. And I don't think any entrepreneur is balanced. I think we're all pretty lopsided when it comes to focusing all of our attention on one thing. Or in terms of like that business being the thing. But I'm trying to take a wider view now. And even with the way that I work, I'm not working 16-hour days or whatever. Like, and I know that's not School of Hermosi. And I don't give a fuck, bro. I don't give a fuck. I'm not Gary Vee. I'm not Hormozi. I'm not Tony Robbins. I probably get about 5 good working hours a day on a good day. And that's it. Like, I want to succeed on my own terms because we're all going to die anyway. It doesn't really fucking matter. We're going to die. I do think there is a component to building your legacy, which is relevant and fruitful and important. But at the end of the day, the people who remember your legacy, they're going to die too. Like, I want to be enjoying this time. And you can gaslight yourself into saying that working 16 hours a day is something you're enjoying. And maybe some sickos out there actually do enjoy it. But I think most people who work like that are doing it because there's a hunger that they can't sate. There's a hole that they can't fill, and they don't know what else to do, so they have to work. I would encourage you to look at yourself and do some DMT. Yeah, so I work hard when I'm working, but I have dramatically cut down on the volume of work that I do because honestly, I don't enjoy working all day. I just simply don't. And I would rather work for a period of time and then go out on a nice walk with my family or with my dog. Or both at the same time. I would rather talk to my dad on the phone. I would rather read a nice fiction book because if you don't read fiction books, you're stupid and boring. I would rather go to the gym. I would rather eat great food. Like, I'd rather do a lot of other things besides work, even though I enjoy the work. And they're like, oh, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Okay, yeah, but like, we work at computers, guys. We work at computers, and there's only so long I want to stare at a screen all day. Period. Period. In fact, I will even say that when I worked at UPS, way before all of this, I don't want to go back to working at UPS. Definitely don't want to, but there was an element of that I enjoyed more than this because at least I'm working with my hands and I see some sort of physical result when I'm done. Now it's just moving pixels on the screen, and that can only be so satisfying, even if it is for me. Yes, I'm not working for anybody else, but after a certain point, it's like, God. So yeah, I don't work as hard anymore. I work hard, but in shorter bursts. So I'm not as relentless as I used to be. I do relent, and I'm okay with that. but that's just because I'm 37 now. So those are the things I did right. Those are some of the things I did wrong. Had millions, was a millionaire on paper, don't have millions. One of the things I will say is one of the big reasons why I don't have millions in the bank right now is I wasn't investing. This is the bottom line. I mean, if you really want to make me cry, make me think about all the money I wasted on things I didn't need when I could have put that into Bitcoin, ETFs, any stock, any top stock, like anything. Not even just saving the money. Saving is good too, but I'm talking about investing. You know, that is something that because of my hubris, because I was so good at making money, I wasn't thinking about not just saving, but becoming wealthy. And this is something I want to point out too. Even if you look at the title of my book and my brand, Rich 20 something. I guess rich means something different for everyone, and I certainly lived, and I still consider myself living a very rich life. You know, I have a comfortable life. It's rich in that way, but it's not wealthy. I've made millions, but I'm not wealthy, and it's because I wasn't thinking from a wealth mentality. And riches moves quickly. Wealth moves slowly, and I was moving so quickly that I wasn't thinking about building. I wasn't thinking about the next phase, and that was definitely to my detriment. And I didn't really have anybody to take me by the hand. Like, yes, I had people, and I only blame myself, but I'm just saying, I'm just telling you my experience. I don't have anybody in my family that can teach me wealth building. A lot of my friends were also on the same quick money train, and a lot of them are in the same place that I am right now. And let's see if they make their video about this. They're struggling, okay, because they're on the same train as me. Some of them who went even higher fell even further. We didn't have any OGs really around, you know, and so very few of us truly invested in a way where we took advantage of all that money we were making when we were making it. So this says it all. Rich 20 something does not necessarily equate to wealthy 30 something. And so now I'm having to rebuild that capacity. So that's what I did right. That's what I did wrong. What I'm doing differently now, well, you know, first of all, I did a lot of soul searching around all of this stuff, which is why I'm able to articulate everything. So it took me a few years of inventory. I mean, really from like 2022 to 2024, I kind of exited the internet to sit in Oregon. I mean, I moved to Oregon at the middle of 2020, and I was still doing pretty well at that point. But like in Oregon for about 3 years, I just sat and stared at the forest and just cried. I did some things in those periods of time, but ultimately those were hard years, and I had to do a lot of soul searching, and so that was necessary to recalibrate. I am now slowing down to speed up. I am not concerned with how quickly my riches return and my wealth accumulates. That is a function of my habits and not my intensity. I'll say that again. My riches returning and my wealth accumulating are a function of the habits that I create for myself and not the intensity. Yes, you want to work hard, but it's more about what you're doing consistently every day than what you're doing really, really hard one time a month. So I'm slowing down to speed up. Like I explained to you with New Wave Press, I am okay with it going a little slower in order to get it right, because this is something that I'm now looking at as a 10, 20, 30-year play. That is more important to me than what happens tomorrow. And that was never the case in the past. I am now focused on skill stacking and specific knowledge. In the beginning of my career, I was focused on skill building, and this is just the natural function of, you know, of being young. I was still building my skills. Now I'm thinking about how to combine my skills in unique ways that competitors and AI can't snipe, which is why I'm doing New Wave Press, because it combines my love and my skill for writing, but also involves editing and design and marketing and product development and networking, and all of these different things, which are more than just one skill. So as a copywriter in the past, I would say you have a product, I write the copy, that's my contribution. With something like New Wave, it's like there are multiple things that I have learned. I mean, even just going through the process of getting a book traditionally published, less than 1% of people who submit books to publishers get their books published. I mean, I had to look at the stats, but I'm pretty certain that's true. I mean, everyone gets rejected. To even get a book published, you have to first get an agent, which every agent rejects you. And then once you get an agent, the agent has to sell the book. And most agents can't sell the book. And then most agents that do sell the book are not going to get a six-figure advance. So I'm already at like a top 1% of authors in my category for that type of achievement. And so that creates a specific knowledge in me that most people don't have, and I can speak from authority on that position. So I'm looking at my unique life and skills, and I'm looking at how to combine them. So Naval Ravikant calls this specific knowledge. It's not just about what you can put into Claude and get in terms of like, here are 5 ways to get, like if I were to ask Claude, how do I get a traditional book publishing deal? Claude could give me an answer based on everything on the internet it's learned. But it couldn't tell you exactly how to do it from someone who's actually done it. So your wisdom can only be gained through real life experience and pain, and your wisdom is not going to be found in a blog post or in a Claude search return, Claude prompt return. So that's what I'm focused on now. I'm focused on utilizing my specific knowledge rather than just general information. I'm focused on having better mentors now. Like I've been talking up Ryan Leslie. He's the man. Like I also, I'm like focused on just learning from a few different sources, and I'm focused on people who have the life that I want, not just the ones who are impressive right now. Again, very, very good advice that seems obvious and even sometimes generic, but I'm very much focused on that because I've learned now that while no one's coming to save you, while it is your responsibility to pull yourself up, as they say, so American. How do you pull yourself up by your bootstraps? You physically can't. But everything up to this point has been my responsibility, and I do wish I would have had people who were further ahead, who could give me the advice that I would have needed at that time. Not just those who were my peers who were doing better, but those who were further along the curve, who could really see behind them a few decades to say, hey, listen, don't get lost in the sauce. Here's what you need to focus on. Because none of my friends, even the ones who were more successful than me, those are the ones I was listening to. I'm like, oh, I made $1 million this year. You made 5. I'm going to listen to you. Yeah, but you also haven't been doing it that much longer than me, so you can only speak to your own catalog of experience. So I'm focused on people who've had way more experience now. I have an infinite timeline now. I'm not going to beat this again, but I have no timeline on when a certain amount of wealth has to be accomplished. It's all just building. And I'm not in this for performance anymore. I mean, I think for a long time, I had like a reputation I felt like I had to maintain. I mean, when you brand yourself as rich 20-something, you feel like, oh, now I have to be rich forever. And so I was afraid to maybe take a step back and do something different because I'd already made my name in this specific space, and I felt like I had to continue on carrying on with that path. Now I don't feel like that anymore, and that's been a blessing. So I don't feel like I have to perform. I don't feel like I have to maintain a certain reputation in terms of like what I'm known for. I can change. I'm already doing that, and so that has been freeing to me and useful in building for my next stage. So that's it. So what can you do to take from me? Focus on wealth and not riches. Wealth is slow. Riches are fast. Get wealthy slowly. It's much better to, if you're investing, be making small contributions to your account every single week than say, I'm going to make a bunch of money and then contribute. First of all, just because of the fact that compounding rewards the consistency that you're creating within the accounts. And 2, just from a psychological perspective, if if you're on a rich path, fast money doesn't stick around, and you're not going to want to build as much if you're making money quickly. But if you are taking it slowly and you're focused on wealth over a 10 to 20 year time horizon, you're going to appreciate that slow grind. And even if you look at the stock market, at any point in time, if you look at a 20-year time horizon, the stock market has always gone up. There are individual years and sometimes periods of time where it doesn't do well, but over a 20-year time horizon, the stock market has always gone up since its inception. So if you're talking about strictly investment, you have to have a long-term time horizon. And then even with your business, if you're just starting off as a business owner and entrepreneur, the business you're starting today likely won't be the one that you're doing 10 years from now. Maybe it will, but most of the time it won't, because you have to go through a few iterations of yourself in order to find the business model that really matches for you. But I will say that when you set your mind to something, you should be looking at it from at least a 10 to 20 year perspective, which sounds really hard if you're young in your 20s like I was. At 22, you don't want to look at something from a 20-year perspective. It just doesn't make sense. You want it today. And then of course, like entertainment culture also warps that sense of timing, because in the entertainment world, which is what we're trained to look at, everything is fast. You blow up overnight and then they give you millions. Whoever they is. In reality, anything you start should have a 20-year horizon, or it's not worth doing. And if it doesn't last 20 years, fine, that's okay too. But with that vision of a 20-year horizon, what it will force you to do is set up the systems accordingly so that you have in place what you need to either make the most of it that you can while you can, or to sell it because you have the systems. It's not about having to do something for 20 years. It's about doing things that are worth being done for 20 years. This is the same thing. Take the stairs. You don't need to go quick. You can go slow. Get great mentors. I talked about that. So two things. I would say these are kind of opposites of the same coin. One, find your unique position. So this goes back to specific knowledge with Naval. Find the thing that you can uniquely speak on. And the way to do that is, it's not always about finding an exact unique product or thing. It's more about your unique perspective on that thing. When I used to take acting classes, my acting coach would say, comedy isn't about funny people. It's about ordinary people in a funny world or with a funny perspective. And I think that's what business is about. You don't always need to reinvent the wheel, but you just need to have a unique perspective on what you're seeing to be able to communicate that. And most business is the process of bundling or unbundling things that already exist. Nothing is that's never been more relevant than in the cable and the streaming industry. We started off with individual channels, then they bundled it into cable, and then we went streaming and we unbundled it, and now we're bundling the streaming services back again. It's like bundle, unbundle, bundle, unbundle. And most businesses are like that too. I mean, a lot of businesses are like that. It's just the process of having one thing and combining it and other things and adding things and then also breaking them apart again. And it's just the unique perspective that you have. So try to find your unique perspective, and that can be based on your lived experience. So it can be something that makes your perspective unique, that allows you to find people who also have a similar perspective. That's what will make you stand apart. Not necessarily just having a totally different product, although that is something also too that's good if you can do it, but also your unique perspective. When we made Strength of Seduction, it's not like there had never been workout programs before. Our unique perspective on that was you can create intimacy through fitness with your partner. And so we created a company and a business that created workout programs for couples. Not only that, but we specifically focus on Black couples. We brought in 20,000 customers for that product and made over $1 million. It's not going now. We decided to move on, whatever. But that's an idea that was unique with a unique perspective, and it was successful, at least in building a customer base. And then, aside from having a unique perspective, I will also say, to your advantage is be boring. Don't worry about doing whatever is flashy or trendy or fast and interesting right now. Think about boring. Man, especially in the age of AI, we still need plumbers, we still need roofers, we still need electricians, and those are things that are manual skills. We still need truck drivers. And maybe you don't want to actually do those jobs, but you can own a business that supplies those products and services to others. We still need home builders. When robots start building homes, then we'll have an issue with home builders. Right now, we still need home builders to go out there and put up a house. One of our authors, Jay Knight, his family business created 15,000 houses. They built 15,000 houses over the course of 42 years. And they exited for tens of millions of dollars. It was about $1 billion, over $1 billion in home sales. And so, yeah, and that's just, I mean, that's just hammer and nails. And they've been doing that since, the 70s, since the 70s, 80s. So do boring stuff as well. Don't worry about what's flashy. Don't worry about what's trending. It doesn't need to be popping on Google Trends for you to have a good idea. It doesn't need to be an AI-driven business. Sure, if AI can help with it, fine, but don't force it into something that it's not just because you want to be trendy. It can be boring. So you have to have a unique perspective, but also don't, it can be boring in a market that is just underserved. It doesn't need to be something even that doesn't exist anywhere else. It can just be something that you identify in a market that currently doesn't exist, or that's not served where you are, especially if it's a local business. And you'd be surprised. Some of these local businesses that you just drive by and you think, oh, there's nothing going on there, they're doing well. Even like, I go to some of these, like I was just getting my clothes dry cleaned a couple weeks ago. And I look in the back and she has thousands of garments back there. I mean, certainly many hundreds of garments, maybe 1,000 suits back there. And I'm thinking each one of these belongs to a customer. Each one of these customers is paying. I just paid her $82. There's some business going on here, I'm sure that they're running some business. So be boring. Anyway, that is my time for today. I have to get on this call with Ryan. We're getting on the market to look at what is going on in the futures market. Another skill set I'm adding to my my brains portfolio. That's it. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Give me some ideas of what you want to hear next from me and what was interesting and what I didn't cover that you wanted to know more about. Have a great morning.